Hey, BSP fans. This is Tim, and you're listening to episode 40 of the Black Swan Podcast. As always, thanks for tuning in, and feel free to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you happen to subscribe and listen on Apple Podcasts, please throw us some stars, and better yet, a review, as that helps boost exposure and push our little series out to more percussion enthusiasts like yourself. So I'm basically in between a few scheduled interviews, and I thought this would be a good time to hit the old memory lane and revisit some of our first episodes, specifically with Todd Meehan, Andrea, Venet, and Matthew Lau. I find these three distinctly creative in their own unique career paths, either from building brands to exploring composition, and in Todd Meehan's case, being comfortable moving at a slower, more intentional pace. So have fun listening to these excerpts, and I'll have links to their complete episodes in this episode's show notes. And speaking of Todd Meehan, if you're not familiar with Liquidrum, certainly give it a Google. Todd has created a witty, engaging, and contemporary approach to percussion, education, and community. Our full conversation was recorded in 2019. This is well before the pandemic, but I actually found it very timely after re-listening. Todd's thoughts on structuring work and life at a less frantic pace seems to resonate more now, considering how all our lives dramatically shifted over the last year. I think connected to the Liquidrum concept and ideas is some stuff I've read of yours about creativity and about performance and just overall, I don't know if you could, philosophies, I guess, or just sort of ideologies. So, like, for instance, there was a blog post I wrote of yours about the hustle and grind, and just taking time to think and to live and not sort of run yourself into the ground. I mean, is that, over the years, ideas that you've developed and kind of integrated into Liquidrum, or is that?
I think it's a big part of it, and I think one of the reasons I want and need there to be humor embedded in a lot of this is simply for the enjoyment factor. I jokingly tell my wife all the time, I desperately want to retire, but I'm only 41 years old, so that's not going to happen anytime soon.
I'm ready to retire.
Yeah. I really, at least right now, and who knows, maybe it's 40-year-old man midlife crisis time for me.
Right.
But I'm really kind of feeling the kind of the magic of what it means to slow things down and to perhaps be a little bit more alive and awake and in tune with what's going on around me, and not just kind of head to the grindstone plowing away. It's just a very different existence than I had when I was in my mid to late 20s, when it was just about how many concerts could I do, and what new rep can I learn, and what can I record, and what can I commission, and all of that. And I think I'm perhaps in a more observational state of life or of existence right now. And so those are the things that I think are just of greater value to me. And and of course, it's where I am. It's not where everybody is. But I do think it's nice to hear that, because when I was 26 and started here, and when I was, doing all the stuff I was doing with maybe early duo days, I didn't know that it would be okay at some point in my life to maybe not do it that way. I kind of thought, well, this is what you do. This is what it means to do this. And my existence needs to be built around just sort of garnering, trophies and awards and accolades for, not that we get trophies and awards for, playing concerts, but, basically every new concert I can put on my website or my CV, and that's what it's about. That's what this is supposed to be. And I think
Right.
there are parts of what we do that are supposed to be like that. But I'm finding there are many other parts that are quite different and are still of equal value. And
Right.
and I acknowledge that. Yeah, I think part of it is just getting a little bit older. Um, but I mean, I want to still have life in me at
Right.
at the age of 60, and I don't want to be burned out, and I don't want to burn myself out doing this stuff so much that I quit before I get there. Because I
Yeah,
think that can
sure.
happen. I think it can
Yeah.
and has happened to other people.
Well, and I think w- one thing you said, which is I think really important, is it is good for people to hear. Like it's
Right.
okay to not run yourself into the ground by the time you're 40. And I think
Right.
you're right. It is sort of a age and perspective thing, but for you to be able to uh talk about it with your students or to talk about it on, one of your other platforms, like I think that's really important for people to hear because I think tied to it also is success. Like you're talking about awards or accolades or notoriety or recognition. Like
Right.
there that's how you typically, I guess, measure success. But I think there's other ways to, like, how do you, as you're kind of working through this, obviously, you've been teaching for a long time and you've been involved in ensemble stuff and Liquidrum. Like, how did you kind of stay grounded or measure success as you were doing that, that maybe wasn't connected to a specific award or notoriety?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think what I found and what I still find now, and one of the reasons I kind of like where I am with things right now is that um, I find that all of that stuff, or some version of that stuff, still comes in some way um, with basically what I feel like I'm doing now, which is trying to just feed into the community. Like, and I don't want to put it or phrase it as sort of, I mean, I'm giving back to the community,
Right. Right.
because that's patting myself on the back in a way that I don't mean to. But I think like whenever I post something on social media, as silly as it seems, I do feel like I'm trying to feed um, some part of the community. And if I every now and again either have in an interview with you, have you say, hey, we've gone around the country and people are into this, or get just
Right.
a direct message back from someone on Instagram saying like, hey, thank you so much for this, or for posting this or whatever. Like that that for me is really fulfilling.
Right.
And again, not to stroke my ego, but just to know that like, oh, this is doing something. Um, Hopefully, there is some value that is associated with this, that people are getting something out of it. And I think
Right.
the reward part of it is just that. And so and that's pretty easy. Like I
Yeah.
can, I mean, if I can be satisfied with that, then I think I could probably do this for a long time. Now, I'm not saying
Right.
that I'm, not going to perform anymore. Like getting together with So and Doug a couple weeks ago in Princeton was great fun, and we're gonna do it again and play a proper concert of Jason's tunes, and any collaboration we have,
Right.
like all of that, I really look forward to as well. And I, that still needs to be a part of what I do in order to legitimize any of these other things that I put out. But I don't need to do 50 of those things a year
Right.
anymore. And that just it doesn't appeal to me in ways that it used to.
Besides teaching at the University of North Florida, presenting master classes around the U.S., and performing with her duo Escape 10, Andrea Venet has managed to focus attention on building a solid catalog of original percussion compositions. My conversation with Andrea actually produced one of the most memorable quotes from our podcast that I still reference almost 2 years later, and that's "give myself permission." Andrea gave herself permission to pursue an interest that perhaps she didn't feel immediately trained or qualified for, but was drawn to as a creative outlet and wanted to explore. Super special side note, I actually got to see Andrea live and in person today. She's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, not far from my house and Black Swamp headquarters. She's performing with Annie Stevens, her Escape 10 duo partner, at a music convention in downtown Grand Rapids. It was cool to catch up with her and reminisce about this past conversation. One thing I do want to talk about too is like composing. So not only obviously, we talked about some commissions that you're doing, but you do a lot of composing. Like when did that start, I guess? And then how does it kind of fit in with some of the other activities you have going on?
It kind of started like recently, like, I guess, I just, I don't know, I just gave myself permission. I guess when you're a student, you're always, I guess I always came from the mindset, like, I'm not a composer. Like, I've never taken composition lessons. And I will give props to people who are, like, legit, they have a composition degree and their brains are, like, 10 times more complex and smart than somebody like me. And, like, that is, totally amazing. And I guess holding that in that high regard, I was always like, I've always been creative, I guess, with music, but I never was like, well, I can't compose, I can't write anything. I did a lot of arranging. I wrote a lot of front ensemble books, right. I guess, and I think that's really helpful for orchestrating, and you are having to kind of come up with new material to fit with what's happening. So I definitely think that helps. But I guess when you're in college, too, you're always just looking for the next cool, important standard repertoire to play. Yeah. And, finally, I guess I still feel like a kid, but I'm getting older. And I just had this realization, like, last summer where I was, like, trying to figure out what to play and what was the next thing to do. And I was like, I've had these ideas rattling around in my head. I'm just going to write it down. Like, I'm allowed. I gave myself permission to write my own stuff and play it. And then I thought about all the other percussionists that are doing that. And right. I was like, well, I'm just going to try it out and see how it goes. And so I kind of, I took like a 2-week walkabout. I just like totally unplugged social media, email, and everything, and kind of just dove in and like wrote 3 pieces. So well, that's what I've kind of been trying out. So
well, I think it's cool, and what I mean, the best point you made was giving yourself permission. I mean, I think you're totally right. When you're, I won't say younger, because people can go to school at any age, but like when you are in school, you kind of have different priorities or different focus, or, maybe like I did study some composition in undergrad. So maybe you have some of that experience, but kind of when you get older or get established a little bit more and you feel more comfortable, like totally giving yourself permission, allowing yourself to like try something different or have another creative outlet. So I think that's a really important point. I mean, I won't tell you how old I am either, but like I'm definitely at a point where it's like, oh, I should have, I wish I, would have done more recording or, kind of learned engineering or mixing or whatever. And Jamel, who works here, is like, well, it's not too late, It's not, so, that's something that, I kind of want to pursue is, give myself permission and get permission from my wife to buy a bunch of mics and software and everything, everything I need. No, I think it's a great point. So you just had a piece released by Tap Space, if I'm saying this right, Omnis Trio. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, obviously that's a trio. You and Annie have a duo. You've composed some stuff for the two of you. What are some of those other pieces?
Well, let's see. I mean, I think most of the stuff that I've written that Annie and I have played is like arrangements. Like we have like a My Favorite Things arrangement and then a Radiohead arrangement. I wrote Faded Lines, which is snare drum duo. that's also a tap space tune that we've played together. And then I've recently written some solo stuff. And then Omnis Trio, I wrote that like in 2017 when we had programmed Trio per Uno, and then some things transpired, and we kind of made a last-minute call to change the programming. So I pumped that piece out over a weekend. And bless my students' hearts, they like learned it in a very short amount of time and did a really great job. And so it's it's a cool, fun piece. It's like for bass drum, and then each person has bongos and some opera gongs. And there's more melodic content in the opera gongs, I think, that I added that I thought was cool, because the dream opera gongs, the pitch bending gongs are cool.
Sure.
So we played that, and then finally, just getting it published through Tap Space. So
Yeah, and I was kind of checking out one piece, Kibo, solo snare drum and mallet quartet, and this kind of leads into another question I had just about influence. I mean, obviously with the kind of some Bob Becker influence with, is it Mudra?
Yeah.
I think is one of, like a similar idea. I mean, is that kind of what, like things that you're interested in, or some influences, and that kind of, obviously, I mean, everybody's influenced by other artists, other compositions, other types of whatever. I mean, obviously that was a pretty heavy influence. Is there kind of other things that you pull from, other ideas, or it's just kind of like you wake up one day and, or I guess you mentioned you had some themes or some melodies running through your head at some point and you got them out?
it's kind of, I mean, it's definitely both. I do think you sound like what you listen to a certain extent. And I guess,
Right.
Music that I really, really enjoy of all different types greatly impacts me, even if I hear something and like, I really like the timbre of that. I like the harmony of that. I like the rhythm of that. I kind of file stuff away that I really react to, I guess, and that's something that impacts me. Kibo definitely was my first composition ever. That's my baby.
Cool.
And I sat on that for a long time. And so actually in grad school, Bob Becker taught a sabbatical, he went on a sabbatical replacement, so he was there for a semester, and he was working on his rudimental arithmetic book, snare drumming. So we were doing a lot of snare drumming and like different kind of sticking permutations and rhythmic subdivisions that were kind of crazy. And so he had me write a solo. And I was like, it was super scary because I had never written anything, let alone a snare drum piece,
Yeah.
And so that was the first version of Kibo, was just her solo snare drum based on a lot of his rudimental arithmetic stuff that we were working on. And that was like in 2005. Then I sat on that piece for like 10 years.
Right.
And in 2015, by that time, I had been studying some Joe Tompkins solos and done more Pratt. My snare drumming background is kind of backwards. I started with violin and then a lot of marimba, and then I really came to like snare drum like later. And it's usually for percussionists, it's opposite. You start on snare drum and then you kind of do the mallet thing. So I kind of beefed it up and like added a bunch of stuff to it. And then I thought, well, actually, so that's where the rhythmic language comes from. But then the original, like, the Kibo comes from the song Africa by Toto. I really like that song, and I like the rhythms in that song. And so when Bob said, you need to write a piece, I was like, well, I can't just pull this from thin air. So I thought, what's a song that I really like the rhythm to and the groove to? So that kind of is where those rhythmic cells come from. So then when I added the ensemble stuff later so I could play it with students, it's not like a cover of Africa, but the harmonies I really like. It's rich harmonies. It's not just a 1-5-1 thing. There's some nice changes in that tune. So that's where that came from. And then, I think, stuff that I'm really inspired by nature, I guess.
Yeah.
I go to the beach and I love it. And it just like gives me ideas for timbres and sounds, and I really like rhythm. So there's several like pop songs that I'll hear that have kind of complex, interesting rhythmic stuff that, I'll remember that rhythm, and I'm like, I really, really like that. And that has been like, the motive for a lot of stuff that I've written. And, Radiohead's kind of like that. I love Radiohead's harmonies and their rhythm and how they kind of trick you metrically. I love that stuff, man. So, I filed it away. And then I have woken up in the middle of the night and just woken up and had an idea in my head that I had to get up and write down.
Yeah.
That I don't know where that came from.
Get out your voice recorder and...
Yeah, oh man, it's so full. My voice memos are so full of stuff.
This last bit was pulled from a conversation with Matthew Lau, where I was very curious about the brand he's created within his concert programming, performances, and social media presence. In my mind, he's really pulled everything together creatively and enthusiastically. Another side note, I say the words brand and vibe about 50 times in this segment. I was still trying to find my podcast legs in episode 10, so try not to be too critical. Thanks.
One thing I really wanted to pick your brain about also was, I mean, you called yourself being dramatic earlier, and then you mentioned Celine Dion. Like, you have this really unique, kind of fun brand. Like,
oh, you mean a wallflower like me? No, I'm not.
Right. Like, well, you've created a brand for yourself. Like, when we met at PASIC, and you had stickers of your profile and like your kind of vibe, your visual down, and then obviously, you really identified your aesthetic kind of musically and how you represent yourself like as a brand. Like, is that something you sort of consciously developed, or it's just kind of who you are and is permeated what you do?
I think a lot has to do with my upbringing, because my parents, given Chinese and all, they're very they're fun. They're not very conservative. Right. My mom's in fashion. She's seen a lot of people, and my dad, he is in fashion now, but he was working for the government. He was I don't even know what he does. Something to do with a housing department. Something brainy. Right. So, but he was never like, oh, you need to be a lawyer. You need to be a doctor. You need to be this. Because I know a lot of people here just doing this, not even just Hong Kong, like all over Asia, because it's a guaranteed way to make money. You can live a comfortable life, but you're not happy doing that, right?
Sure.
But my parents never like that. They were like, do whatever you want that makes you happy. So I was never shy. I mean, hello, if you met me. I was never shy.
I've seen it in person. Yes.
Yeah. You have to experience it in person. So it's too good. It's too good.
Right.
So I was always like, I wanted to do what I want, and I'm not shy about it. Mm-hmm. I went through a dark phase when I was doing my master, because it was a lot of different opinion. You're also in New York, so people are not exactly the nicest, and they're very negative at points.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people telling me what to do, and say, oh, you don't have a competition experience. You're not a prodigy. You don't have all of this experience in your resume, or you don't win this competition, or blah blah blah. Oh, you shouldn't do this because it's not right, because who we're not doing that. And I was like, why can't I do what I want, right?
Yeah, who cares?
There was like a brief, I don't know, 1 year and a half point, and when I got to Stony Brook, I met all these fabulous colleagues of mine, and we all very diverse. We all play contemporary music, but we all have so much different things going on, and I got to experience a lot of like, oh my god, this is like what I know is only like a little sliver. Right. So at that point I was like, like F those people, I didn't listen to them. I'm gonna find my own voice, and Eduardo really helped me on rap and everything. I mean, what I like musically reflect on my personality, and my branding it's like it happened like by accident, to be honest.
Yeah.
Those stickers and the graphic that you saw on my face, that was not intentional.
Yeah.
My hair wasn't intentional to begin with. It wasn't.
Yeah, it's just who you are.
Because I had a barber because I have really straight like thin Asian hair, so when I put it down after a shower, it's like straight, right?
Yeah.
So when you see like people with gorgeous curly thick hair who wake up and like just have like a poof going on, like I was really jealous. And growing up and going to salons, they were like, you can't do it because you have thin Asian hair.
Right.
So I didn't try to do it, but until I met this barber in New York, he was like, "Oh, we know we can make it happen." He's this like great Russian guy, so he gave me a cut, and I don't know what he does, but think of my poof now, but maybe 2 inches slightly shorter.
Okay.
Right? So it happened. So I'm like, how can I do it? How can I do it to the extreme, right? Like if I wanted to go all out like a mohawk punk kind of thing, what do I do? So I asked my friend who had a mohawk, and like, you should use this gel. So I did, and it got bigger and bigger. And at one point, it was almost like a sculpture. It was too tall at that point,
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was kind of scary. People like kids were pointing at me, and like they were like, "Mom, what is that?" And then it got toned down to where I mean, it's not subtle, but it's like it's like a pastry. It really does look like a pastry.
Right. It's not. I mean, it's not full of jam or jelly or anything. It's
you might be surprised. It's
on what day it is. It's still early in the morning, so anything.
It's full of secrets. You don't
well, I don't know.
But my friend from Australia, Adam 10, who has a thriving blog and YouTube following, and he said I should put that on a sticker. That was his idea.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's smart because it does. I mean, I know it seems small. I mean, it's just part of your appearance, but it does set you apart. And I don't mean brand like just the way you look, but like the way you approach, I guess, your business, like how you're traveling and the music you're playing and your look, your vibe, like it all seems very cohesive. Like, and I was just curious, I guess, if you've kind of thought it all through, or if it's all these pieces have just kind of come into place as you've developed as a percussionist. And
they sort of just come together. I mean, I'm a Libra. I'm a very controlling. I get paranoid when I know things are not in my control. But there's something like as I get older, things you can control, and they might be a good accident, right? So that's what's happening.
Is that something you would suggest for kind of younger players? Or, I mean, obviously to be themselves and not, trying, like you said, you had maybe some critics or some negative vibes. Like, obviously you don't listen to those. Be yourself, be who you are. But as far as kind of developing a broader picture of themselves, like, would you suggest that as a player?
I would suggest talk to a lot of people.
Sure.
Yes, you should trust your teacher. You should do your exercises, your A2s, your keep a practice journal. You should trust your teacher on certain things like that. That's like a hard fact, right? What you should play. If you play this piece, you can achieve this technique. You can play the next piece, blah blah blah. But when you talk to more people, you have to keep an open mind. Basically, like there's always more than one solution. Just because who did this in their life doesn't mean you have to do the same thing. It might work out for her or him, but it might not work out for you. When I was in Florida in Malab, the summer intensive that I taught, a lot of the younger, like the senior in high school, freshman college, they want a definite answer on a lot of things, and I tell them I don't know the answer because it's not as black and white as you think.
Sure.
It takes years to figure it out. Like I'm still trying to figure out. Like, talk to a lot of people. Talk to your peers. Talk to your upperclassmen. Talk to your teacher. Talk to your teacher's friend. Take a lot of lessons, and really, really, really think.
Yeah.
But you cannot just talk to people and not practice. That's just not going to happen. Right. You have to practice. You have to be kind to people. when you talk to people, you're gonna talk to nice people. You're gonna get like nasty people, and be positive about things. I think being positive is really important, especially you're in the arts. This is not exactly easy. So I think you have to be positive the whole time. And if you talk to some nasty people, great. You don't have to be nasty. That's just good manners. You can just back off and just don't get sucked up into the negative energy.
Yeah, I should have you talk to my girls sometime. Like, just don't be nasty. Just be
don't
nice.
Be nasty.
Use your manners.
Don't be nasty. Oh my God, yes.
This has been a BSP production, recorded and produced out of the Black Swamp Percussion facilities in Zeeland, Michigan. Audio and production assistance by Nathan Coles. Intro and outro music by Adam Hopper. Music sprinkled throughout the episode was from Anthony D. Bartolo. Hope you enjoyed this best of episode, and we'll be back with a new guest in a few weeks. Take care.